Cloudcast Media.
Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
I'm Drew Schlosberg, and it is a thrill to have on the show with me today a former colleague, longtime friend, great journalist, award-winning journalist, and now an author of Wordslinger. What a perfect name for a book, and that is Len Novarro. How you doing, Len?
I'm doing great, Drew. It's amazing how far back we go, isn't it? After all this time, it's terrific. It's good seeing you again.
Oh, it's always great to see you, and you always have some great content. And Len and I worked for the Copley Press. Len was on the Evening Tribune side of the paper, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
That's correct. 8 years. Yeah.
8 years, and then when I came on board, the paper had just merged, and I was honored to run community and public relations, as Len knows, and was a spokesperson for 11 years. So I got interviewed by people like Len. They made no distinction between me and anybody else they'd interview. So you guys were just as tough on me as other folks were. Len, listen, the book, when did you have this gleam in your eye? Probably ever since you started reporting? You always wanted to write a book?
Not really, but I'll tell you, I was interested in compiling a lot of information that went into the book. I just kind of kept it in reserve, sort of made notes on it, kept my clips.
Right.
And then the pandemic broke out. And as you may know, we have a nonprofit. Rosalind, my wife, and I have a nonprofit. Right. And we sort of put it on the side during that period and decided, well, it might be time to write the book. And I like to see that Trump made me do it because
beautiful.
You just look at the circumstances occurring this week. President Trump announced he's going to run again for office. 1977, the head of the Ku Klux Klan told me that we have somebody in office in 40 years, and sure enough, so. There's so many things that happened this week. The incident with Russia and Poland.
Sure.
My mother was Polish. On the Polish side, my grandfather was impressed into the Russian Navy. He jumped ship.
Wow.
Escaped into this country, was able to get into this country that way. The Godfather trilogy is going to be shown on AMC this week. All day, I believe, next for Thanksgiving.
It always is, right?
Yeah. And I was on the set of the Godfather. The book talks about how the movie almost was not made, and it also talks about something that Marlon Brando did on set, which set everybody back a little bit. So there's a lot of tidbits that encompass the book or are part of the book. But really, I wrote it to capture what I call the golden era of journalism.
Right.
There's a period from the late 50s to the early 90s where you had people like Tom Wolfe, Gay Talese, Jimmy Breslin, the greats, and also to kind of reflect on not only what I did, but what I represented. And in a sense, I represent hundreds, if not thousands of journalists out there just doing their job every day, trying to get at the truth. And not all of us were the Woodwards and the Bernsteins and people like that, or the people that broke the Pentagon paper stories, but we did our best to tell the truth. So I hope in some ways it represents those people. At the same time, I've collected so many anecdotes over the years because I worked in New York, I worked in Orlando, Colorado, Memphis, before coming to San Diego in 1984. So we talk about cults today, the Trump cult, for example.
Right.
We had our own cult here right in San Diego, Terry Cole Whitaker, the high priestess of yuppiedom. Mm-hmm. So there's so many things that are connected in so many ways. So that sort of inspired me to do the book. But foremost, the one major story that I was involved in 1979, 1980, which really, I believe, launched Al Gore's career, focusing on the environment. And that was when I discovered in the Fraser section of Memphis the system set up by the mayor of Memphis years before to welcome the chemical industry. The chemical industry, as a result, polluted the area to such an extent that I would say about 20% of the population was affected in one way
Wow.
or another. So it was a terrible situation. So
Yeah,
for all those reasons, that's how the book came about.
Yeah, and of course, Al was from Tennessee, as we know, and his dad too. Correct? Is that right?
Memphis, yeah.
Yeah, Memphis, right? And we're chatting with Len Novarro, a former journalist for in San Diego Evening Tribune and other places he worked for as well. Now the author of Wordslinger. You brought up something that I think is really important, and that is trust and truth. And I was a journalist a billion years ago, and then I went over to the dark side, the marketing side of journalism, of course. But those people who really understand our craft and journalism know that the worst thing we can do is stray from the truth. And we'll be fighting for what we need to get out to the people to know that what we are printing is accurate, it's fair, it's balanced, the best we can do that. Of course, fair and balanced is in the eye of the beholder and the reader, and we all know that. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, we'll get more into the book, it certainly makes my hair race on the back of my neck, is when I hear the word fake news. It's an easy way out to, if you disagree with something, it makes it fake. Talk about that.
I mean, technique?
Well, just the fact that, we're in an era now, if you don't agree with something, it makes it fake. And said, well, that's not true. You just disagree with it. The information that you're given is true.
Yeah, well, we've gotten to a point where, and again, I don't blame social media entirely, but social media has a role in this. We've got to the point where now, in order to tell a story, we have to give both sides. Rather than focus on the truth, you tell person A's side of the story and person B's side of the story, and one cancels the other out.
Yeah.
There's not an attempt to really get
False
at the core
equivalency.
of what actually happened enough. It's the feeling that we've got to be balanced.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes we're balanced in the wrong direction,
Yeah.
and it never used to work that way. If you infringed on the truth, you had your so-called, white in a sling.
That's right.
If you worked for a newspaper, you were either fired or you were held in some regard in contempt.
Right.
In a lot of cases, you were sued. You faced a libel suit, but that doesn't exist anymore. But the protections that the newspapers had were gone long ago, and it wasn't just social media that did it. It was the FCC in the old days. You had to give balance. You had to give a fair side to both sides of a radio presentation. That was eliminated in 1987 during Reagan's regime, or Reagan's time in office. Right after that, the same year, Rush Limbaugh started his show. Talk radio became implanted every place you went. And with that, then social media enters the arena. Technology becomes updated to the extent that the unions can't deal with it. So all these factors played along with the time and the rise of social media to create a situation that I'm afraid to say it's too late. There's just no way out of it.
So the Fourth Estate, as we know it, is not the Fourth Estate.
No, the Fourth Estate is no longer there. Considering the Fourth Estate of government, that's a very powerful term.
Right.
You had three houses of Congress, and then you had the Fourth Estate.
Right.
That was very, very important. There was a period in yellow journalism, as you know, when there's a lot of muckraking and people like the
Randolph Hearst.
Yeah, and Scripps to a degree.
Yeah.
But that ended, I would say, in the late 20s, early 30s, where you really had the rise of really good journalism and newspapers. In New York, for example, there's a period where you had 14 daily newspapers actually operating.
Yep.
They went out of business, and eventually, most of them went out of business, and ended up where you had 7 newspapers, and then the strike of 62 narrowed that down to 3. The 3 newspapers that exist today: the New York Post, New York Daily News, and the
Times.
The Times. My uncle worked for the Daily Mirror. Daily Mirror, New York, which was a competitor of the New York Daily News, had 1 million readers a day, and they couldn't make it through the strike.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a lot of blame to go around. It's not just social media, television. As a matter of fact, people blame television all the time, but television really was helped by newspaper strike because somebody had to step in and do something.
Well,
television picked up the ball in doing that.
Well, I think you're spot on there. We're chatting with Len Novarro, for journalist, author of Wordslinger. I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media. I'm chatting about Len's book, Chock-full. How'd they get the book, on Amazon?
It's an Author House book published by Author House.
Okay.
It's found on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, a lot of sites. As a matter of fact, if you go to wordslingerbook.com, you can get some background information on it. It'll tell you where to go to buy the book. By the way, the full title is Wordslinger, The Life and Times of a Newspaper Junkie, because that's what I was, a newspaper junkie. I grew up in a household where my father would go to work with the Daily News in the morning, would come home with the World Telegram and Sun in the afternoon. My uncle worked for the Daily Mirror. I had another uncle who worked for the Journal American at one time. On Sunday morning was not a Sunday morning after Mass if you didn't spread out the comics on the
Of course.
on the living room floor and read every newspaper comic you could get your hands on. They call them the funnies in those days.
They did.
So I grew up in a family that really appreciated newspapers. From the time I was 12, I almost didn't see myself doing anything else but newspapers.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, and I wish my business partner was here, the founder and CEO of Cloudcast Media, Charles Parisi. He's out. We're opening up another Cloudcast site in Atlanta called Cloudcast Atlanta. But, Charles is a newspaper junkie like you. And he grew up in New York, and every Sunday he reads about 1 billion papers, and he said it's his greatest thing to do on Sunday, just like you're describing. So it's not always dead in that aspect. I grew up with the LA Times, and so I read the sports section every single day, start to finish, Jim Murray, John Hall. I couldn't get enough of it, and I became a sports writer in almost the same way. And I knew I wanted to be a sports writer when I was 12 years old, and I became a sports writer. It's all good stuff. I want to get back to how important it is for people to try to discern journalism from just people blaring out news that has no news behind it. How do you delineate the two?
That's almost impossible in this day and age. It's just I really, having been away from the newspaper business for a while, after the Tribune and the Union emerged, I went to work for Reuters News Service for about 10 years, and did some freelancing, and then we did the nonprofit Asian Heritage Society. So I don't know how any journalist can do that today without laboring the way they do. I really marvel at what the Union Tribune does. Right. Putting out that newspaper, and any newspaper that can survive in this day and age and in this environment is a marvel to me. It really is.
Right. So how do we make these decisions? Back in the day, you could be pretty rest assured for the most part. You're reading the newspaper, you're going to get the facts, especially on the news side, and the opinions, going to have opinions. That's where it should be, and columns and all that business. But how do you get through the clutter? Or is it impossible to get through the clutter?
Well, you have to use diligence. I mean, in the day,
right?
My day sound like an old, whatever you want to call it. But I'll just give an example of one story I worked on in Memphis, the major story actually back then. I was working the night desk on a New Year's Eve. It was 1979, and I got a call, woman in distress over the phone, and she was really literally crying out for help. Please help me. My family is really facing really unusual circumstances. She had kids, she claimed, that were very, very sick, and nobody had anything to do with it. They didn't care about it. So I went and interviewed her after New Year's. I think it was about a week later. Came back, talked to the health department, and got them on the phone. They said, "Oh yeah, we've talked to this woman many times. We've seen her and the family. They're really cranks. There's nothing wrong. They're just imagining stuff." And I started to ask them questions about the kids. She had a little girl who was 3 at the time, and 2 boys a little bit older. And the health department told me it's a congenital problem. They're inherited something from the parents. Well, I knew all 3 kids were adopted, so right away that set off a red light in my head. And I began pursuing it, going through the records of the health department. I went on the ground went into the area in which they lived, went to something like 120 homes, found cancers in 70% of the homes. There were little kids losing their hair, getting all kinds of bumps on their body, dogs dying, cats with diseases. You have to go out. You have to hunt up the facts yourself. Every story I ever wrote had to have a second source. You just don't take one person's word for it.
That's right.
And the government tells you something, you look to see how truthful it is. You have to go beyond the information that's fed to you. I don't know if any of that is done as much as it was years ago, but in two circumstances, in both the paper I worked for in Orlando and the paper I worked for in Memphis, I had very sensitive stories, and the editors of both newspapers called me into the offices. In one case, in Memphis, where the real estate prices in the neighborhood were really suffering because of the stories, the editor called me into his office and said, "Len, just tell me, are your facts true?" I said, "Absolutely." And he literally ushered them out of the office.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the editor in Orlando for a very similar story.
Yeah.
Same thing happened. But I don't know if that kind of stuff exists anymore today.
Well, I hope it does to some extent. We're chatting with Len Novarro, author of Wordslinger, The Life and Times of a Newspaper Junkie. Len and I were colleagues with the Copley Press many, many moons ago. I'm Drew Schlosberg, and you're listening to Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community, a show brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union here in the Mission Fed Credit Union studios here. We come back from break. Len, want to talk more about Wordslinger, how you get Wordslinger. There are a couple stories I want you to share with us. We could have this conversation go for 3 hours and we wouldn't miss a beat, but unfortunately we don't have that. We're going to be right back after this message.
When you do your banking with Mission Fed, you get great rates on auto and home loans. That's good for you, but something good also happens for a lot of other people. We're not for profit, so we put money back into the community to help lots of great nonprofits to keep San Diego strong. So you're not just getting something good, you're doing something good. Come to Mission Fed. It's banking that's good for all.
Brand amplification is the DNA of Cloudcast Media, and our code is the powerful blending of sound, voice, and storytelling to lift local brands and their communities. Whether it is our Brandcast, Schoolcast, or Causecast platforms, the unifying ethos is all about this community, the one you call home. If you dare to dream and want to explore the brand amplification of Cloudcast, a national leader in local podcasting and other Winfluence strategies, please visit us at cloudcast.us.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media, and you're listening to Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community show brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, doing great things for San Diegans for more than 60 years. Honored to be in the studio with my former colleague, Len Novarro, a journalist and now author of Wordslinger, The Life and Times of a Newspaper Junkie. You know, I think, Len, we're just talking about, my God, how do you get through the truth? How do you get to the truth in all this business, and just so many things that have changed in our field, but still a very, very important field for many different reasons. But I do want to, we've got about 5 or 6 more minutes, but I wanted to touch on some of these very briefly if you can. So your most famous relative is the Yankee Clipper?
A distant relative, I want to add.
But distant and relative still counts.
My grandmother on the Italian side, and Joe DiMaggio's mother grew up in a town called Shaka, which is right outside of Palermo. And they both came to the U.S. about the same time. She and her husband went to San Francisco, and my family moved to New York. They kept in touch, and I only remember meeting him once when I was about 5 years old. He was over the house and shook hands with him, and he was introduced. And I have a famous photo of members of my family posing with him at a Sunday dinner. There's a whole flock of them around the table. And two of my aunts, one of my aunts is kind of hugging him, and the other aunt is also there. So he was a distant relative, true.
Yeah. So you got a million stories in the book, and I encourage everyone to get this. We're only going to touch on a few of them. You had a confrontation with Paul McCartney?
Yeah, I did. I was the entertainment editor in Staten Island, and the story's in the book. I was going to hold back on telling it, but I might as well tell the story. It's one of many stories.
Just tease them. Yeah.
This was after the Beatles broke up, and I got a call at my desk that somebody saw Paul McCartney and Linda Eastman on the ferry boat going from Manhattan to Staten Island. So I ran down to the ferry terminal, my notebook in hand.
Of course.
And sure enough, they exited the ferry ramp, and they were walking through the terminal. And Paul had, I think, his daughter on his shoulder, was walking along with her. And I don't recall if Linda had anyone with her, but the two of them and one or two of the kids were walking along. I walked up to him, introduced myself, and said, would you mind if I ask you a couple of questions? And they went into this routine that they used to do all the time when they didn't want to talk to people. They'd both start going, blah, 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 blah. So I'd ask him another question, they'd return with blah, 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 blah. And on it went like that. So finally, as we're walking along the terminal, he takes the ferry ramp up and turns around, and I said, I just need to ask you just one very quick question. And he turned around and he says, F off, twit.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so I'm walking up the ferry ramp, following him, and he turns around and raises his left arm and is about to make a motion as if he's going to
hit you,
punch me. And I said, but this is not in the story.
Right.
I said, do it. I'd like to make a lot of money out of the deal, something to that effect. But what I also said was, I can make you a star, and I closed with that. And then he turned around, scurried up the ramp with Linda and the kids.
Yeah.
So that's my famous.
Did you report it?
Yeah, I reported it, and it was picked up by the Newhouse newspapers.
Sure.
I think about 20 newspapers. They ran the story and did a couple of editorials about it.
No, that's great. Talk about.
By the way, I might add, I never lost my appreciation for him. He's one of the greatest songwriters ever. Really.
Listen, just saw him in Petco a few years ago. He was phenomenal at age 80, for God's sake. Yeah. Hey, I got a couple of minutes here, but briefly talk about your nonprofit.
Well, Rosalind, my wife, and I started a nonprofit in 2005, which was an outgrowth of our newspaper that we started here in 2002, focusing on the Asian Pacific Islander community in San Diego. We're the first newspaper in California to do that. The society was an outgrowth of the newspaper. We thought, what else can we do to focus on the Asian Pacific Islander community? So we started the annual Asian Heritage Awards. Then we did that for several years, and as an outgrowth of that, we formed the Boost STEM Society, which stood for Business Opportunity, Outreach, Science, Technology, Entrepreneurship for middle school kids. And we held classes doing that, and we held events related to that. So the society is still here. It's kind of on a
little hiatus.
A hiatus, yeah, because of the pandemic. Right. But Rosalind's been working very hard keeping it afloat.
Do you have a website people can go to?
Yeah, it's AsianHeritageSociety.org.
Okay, great.
And we also have a website dealing with the AsianHeritageAwards.com as well.
Right. So, getting back to Wordslinger, the life and times of a newspaper junkie. How many papers do you read these days?
None.
Really?
I get all my news. I get all my news online by going to AP News.
But are you going to any online newspapers? Like did you get the Union Tribune?
New York Times.
How about Union Tribune?
Union Tribune, New York Times, and AP. Those are my three sources.
Right.
Yeah, but I go online for them.
But you'll read them cover to cover?
Pretty much so. But I'll tell you, when I'm out of town, or when we're out of town anywhere, I will always still pick up a newspaper.
Of course.
Just like I used to do in the old days, no matter where I am.
No, I think
especially local newspaper.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm a little prejudiced about that. I defend newspapers and journalists to the nth degree. Not perfect by any means, and it's certainly a lot different than when I was going to school. Really funny. People think that I got involved in journalism because of, All the President's Men. I was 19 when Watergate hit, and I said, no, I wanted to be a journalist before that. But there was the greatest jump in J school admittance during Watergate, of course. Mm-hmm. And what I love about it is Bob is still going, and so is Carl, and the books he's written on Trump. And I'm sure you've met them both, and I love to see that. And, the analogy about the January 6th, committee, and what was going on with Sam Ervin, okay, and that someone's going to be running to the dictionary and go, who the hell is Sam Ervin, who did the Watergate hearings. The parallels, I think, are terrific.
Yeah, you just can't get it out of if you're like you and me, you just can't get it out of your blood. There's no way you can.
It'll be with
you can
me.
excise it, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be with forever. You got about a minute to go. Any final comments, Len?
Yeah, I would like to, if I might, impose upon your audience,
please,
to review the book. Amazon has a setup where if anyone can review the book.
Right.
So if anyone is out there willing to review the book, we would appreciate that. You can get it online just by Googling Wordslinger, The Life and Times of a Newspaper Junkie, or the first 10 people who either contact you or contact our number at 619-400-7868. We'll send a free copy of the book. They can review it. I'll even autograph it if they like.
No,
619-400-7868.
We'll make sure we do that, and I can't wait to have you back on the show, and you get to meet Charles Parisi, and you guys are one of a kind, and thank you so much for your benevolence with CureBound. Our guests that were on beforehand doing great things for cancer research. They said, boy, I can't wait to hear Len's interview. I said, well, you'll hear it. We'll send you the disc on this. Len, it's always great to see you. You look terrific. You don't age, and I think that's because you write great books like Wordslinger, The Life and Times of a Newspaper Junkie. I'll look forward to having you back on.
Thanks so much, Drew. Really appreciate it. And it's my wife who keeps me young.
Okay, very, very good. And to your bride who's sitting right to the next of us, wishing you great success moving forward, Len.
Great.
I'm Drew Schlosberg. You've been listening to another edition of Spotlight on the Community Show, brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, doing great things to San Diegans for more than 60 years.
You've been listening to an episode of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego community. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
Cloudcast Media.